My name is Kalen Dorr. This is Behind the Cactus. This is my co-host, Preston Garrison.
So we had a few haters that told us we didn't know what we were talking about when it comes to the Taranis first Spektrum. Myself and Kalen, I think Kalen, you started out with Taranis when I met you. You were quite the Taranis lover.
Oh yeah.
And when I met you, I was like, listen, you got to check this out. I had like a $40 DXE radio, which I wish I had one here, but I don't. But they're a $40 Spektrum DXE radio, and I gave it to him. And to just be like, here, you got to try this out. He told me the same things. I think you were telling me the fail-safe issues and all the stories.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Everyone's
been saying. And so I said, you're not going to have any fail-safe radios. The DXE, if anyone doesn't know, it doesn't even, it's European power, so it's not even American power. It's less power than a normal radio. It's 22 milliseconds and not 11 milliseconds, so it is slower. And so I gave you this DXE, and how did you feel about it?
Actually, it felt pretty good. I didn't notice any latency increase over the Taranis, but the gimbals were way better. That was the big thing I noticed.
So it's pretty much the same speed, but the gimbals felt
pretty
better.
much, yeah.
And for a $40 radio, that was kind of
pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. So we were using Lemon RXs then, right? And the non-diversity ones, the cheap ones, and they worked great.
Very good, yeah.
So that was our beginning, and then since then we started working with Spektrum, and they helped us out with the code, and we were working together with them. So that's kind of why we even got even more into Spektrum. But that was our first thing, and then like you said, I think the latency was the same. It felt about the same.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, let's step you up. Let's try I don't know, what are they, $200 DX8?
Something, I don't know the exact price, but it's something like that.
Which is what you use now, and we'd have it here, except it's taken apart. We'll show you that in the video for this testing. But yeah, we used the $200 DX8 when we did our tests. And we actually tested the latency between the two because, you can't take anyone's word for it. We're a bunch of liars. Everyone sees red when they watch us. Wow. I wore black just so people wouldn't see as much red when they see me as. And we did the actual test. So the results, the data's coming next. But yeah, when we went to the DX8, what did you feel the difference was?
So I noticed the DX8 immediately. It did feel better. I noticed that you make sharp movements. You feel it. You feel more connected to the quad with the DX8 versus the Taranis. And I didn't know if it was the gimbals feeling that way or what. But obviously we've tested and we know what it is now. But back then I thought it was really the gimbals more than anything else. But we looked at a lot of logs and realized there were actually differences in how the radio interacted with the PID controller. So we did see differences.
So we hooked up an oscilloscope to a DX8. I have a DX9 here, which, actually he has a DX9. There's what the DX9 looks like. This is the higher end version. This one's about double the price.
$400 or $500, somewhere around there.
It's pretty similar to the DX8. The DX8's half the price, like, I don't know, $250. I don't remember what retail is on it, but it's a pretty good price. Around the same price as a Taranis, so it'd only be fair to test something the same price as a Taranis.
Yeah.
We hooked an oscilloscope up to a DX8. We hooked an oscilloscope up to your Taranis, one of these guys right here.
Which we're showing in a video right now, right?
Yeah, which we're gonna show in a video in a minute. When we watch it, we'll show it.
Oh, do you have it ready?
That's how that works. It's magic.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's a little witchcraft. So there's a lot of options right now. I mean, this thing is the maximum, close to the maximum U.S. power in terms of transmission power. The Taranis, from what I understand, it's actually higher power than is legal in the U.S. So if you have a little less fail-safes on long-term stuff or going through penetration, it's probably because that's higher power.
Maybe. I think they probably end up varying between.
Yeah, I mean,
radios,
we don't have issues. Like I was out with Schizo, flying in his buildings. He never has fail-safes. We never have fail-safe. We don't really ever see any fail-safes. We had one over the water, but as you say, and anything's going to happen over the water. None of the radio is going to work. The most powerful, from what I understand, radio the Spektrum makes is the DX18, which is right here. This one's supposed to be the most powerful. I don't know if the DX20 is. That's what they told me. And yeah, this radio is great. I love it. I'm using the DX9 maybe because it's a little bit smaller right now, but they're both good radios. Kalen uses a DX8. That's the one we use for testing.
Love the gimbals on the DX8.
And we're not saying Taranis is a bad radio. It's a great radio. In fact, we just tested, why don't you pull it out?
What am I pulling out? This here?
Yeah. This guy right here, $100. It's an awesome radio, especially if you're thumbing. It does work great. We do like it. And little known fact, we're actually going to go after the Taranis firmware next. We think we can get rid of the latency. We think you actually can double the speed of the Taranis. Actually, I think we can quadruple the speed because we think we can double the speed of the Spektrum with Taranis. And it's, you know, open source, we can do that. We theorize the problem with the Taranis is it has an F2, right?
Yeah, it has an F2, which, well, I have an idea of what it is. First of all, it's using an STM chip. The DX9 doesn't use an STM chip, and the STMs tend to have slower ADCs, which is what's used by the firmware to pick up where the stick position is, which is also what we're going to show here, why we decided to use the sticks and not switches for this test.
So our theory is it's based on an open source core, too. Do they use HAL or no?
I don't know if they do or not. I haven't really looked. They're using C++. They're not using C.
Yeah, so which is a little bit slower. I know that's going to be another thing everyone's going to argue. But C++ is a little higher level language. It does more for you, so it does have more overhead.
It is definitely slower, yeah.
So our theory is if we could put the Raceflight 1 core on the radio, it'll be way faster, way more efficient. We might be able to increase the speed by that alone and then do a protocol update and maybe some new RXs, and we can really push it to like landline speeds. We have some theories about it. We're going to test them. Not right now. We're going to obviously get Raceflight 1 to where it's everything we need is in it before we mess around with it. But that's the plan. And I think, is there any more radios by you? Or is that,
nope.
No. And then what we think is we've tested the Horus too, right here. And it uses...
It's an F4.
Some different firmware. I mean, this is a beautiful radio. If I was going to spend the money on a Taranis, you can get rid of that. This is the radio I'd get because it is insanely gorgeous looking.
And the gimbals feel pretty good on it too.
Yeah, gimbals feel amazing. They feel better. This has the new M9 gimbals in it, which they feel decent.
They're all right.
They're
not like the 8 gimbals.
Yeah, this one just feels amazing.
Yeah.
It has a badass screen too, which sells me alone because it looks great. But the problem is, but we think this has an F4, so we think that's part of the reason this one, it feels less latent. I didn't want to tear this one apart and measure it. We may at some point in the future. It's really not, I mean, it's a $500 radio, so it's not exactly the same. But you can get these $200 radios if we get less latency. I think that's a pretty good way to go. Yeah. But we think the F4 actually helps it be less latent. Because maybe the way we can explain this too, so the way it works is you move the stick, and it sends a signal. The processor looks for, are they resistance-based?
Voltage. Well,
they're voltage.
Yeah, it goes through a resistor and then it measures the voltage.
So okay, so basically, yeah. So they are it increases the resistance,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So basically, it increases the resistance, and you're measuring the voltage, the output of the resistance. So as you move the stick one direction, it gets higher resistance. The other direction, so it's basically a potentiometer. And then an ADC actually converts that to basically a number between. It's STM, so probably 60. It's a 16-bit number.
No, 12-bit number.
Oh, it's 12 bits. Okay. So we does it to a 12-bit number. Our theory is that the time it takes to convert that and then do its little magic and then send it out as a packet, that's where the latency comes in. Now, don't get us wrong. The protocols both run, well, one runs 9 milliseconds, which is Spektrum, it seems about. Each packet is 9 milliseconds apart.
Yes, that's right.
And each packet on...
No, other way around. Taranis, the S-bus is 9 milliseconds apart, and the Spektrum is 11 milliseconds apart. So the packet itself on Taranis is slightly faster, but that doesn't really matter much, and we're going to show you why.
Yeah, because the amount of time it takes to take the data, process it, and send it out is where we're getting the latency.
Exactly.
Not in the protocol, so that might be a miscommunication. It's not about how fast you're moving the packets, it's about how fast you get the data and throw the packet in.
Yeah, it's like if you use air mail, that's great, it's very fast versus ground mail, but if you sit in the store, if the product sits there in the store for 3 days before going out, it's a good chance the ground mail is going to be faster.
Right. So basically, we have this video here. I'm gonna pop this on the screen. Everyone should be seeing this now, hopefully, if we did our editing magic. All right, so in this video, you'll see we took apart a DX8. This is on Kalen's dirty desk. This is after he cleaned it up. Notice a bottle cap here and here.
I don't count this as cleaning up. This is, let's hurry up and show the picture.
But anyways, in a minute here, if you look, we're going to show you. I had to pull out the laser pointer.
Thank you, Oz, for telling us about these laser pointers, by the way.
We got these from Banggood. Okay, so in the radio, you can see Kaylin wired directly into the potentiometer, which is your gimbal. And we hooked that up to a Solili
Logic analyzer.
So basically, this measures the signal on the computer where we can graph it and time it. We hooked it up to that directly. And so the way it works is
it measures the voltage.
Basically, when it gets to the peak, it triggers on a flight controller some custom code. And that custom code triggers a light. Oh, no, you did a motor output, right?
Yeah, well, I just used it as a GPIO.
Yeah,
we'll
so he basically flipped a bit and sent a signal, and then the logic analyzer on another channel measures the time that happens. So the start of this pulse is when the trigger on the top of the screen. That's when the flight controller triggered, and the pulses on the bottom are the potentiometers moving the gimbals, essentially.
So something we should note here is the Taranis and Spektrum actually are backwards, whereas the Taranis, when the signal goes low, is full throttle, and the Spektrum is when the signal goes high, it's full throttle.
So that's the end of that video. All right, so we're going to link in the video comments basically a link to this Google Doc. And what this Google Doc is it's pictures of the logic analyzer, and it has measurements, 10 random measurements from Spektrum, 10 random measurements from Taranis. Basically, we did measurements with the logic analyzer. You can see in the images here, and you can do this experiment yourself. This is not that complicated. A cheap logic analyzer will do it, an oscilloscope will do it. But you can go over here. So if you look at, we'll look at the first one, linked in the document. It's a Spektrum one. It's image 0, and you can click on the link on it.
So the methodology here was, I just moved the stick up and down as quickly as I could, within reason, of course. And we're looking at when the signal peaks. This radio is calibrated to race flight 1, so as soon as it hits 100% throttle, it triggers the GPIO. And it's going through the radio first, so it takes, what we're measuring here is a latency between when the stick is actually at full throttle to when the flight controller gets the full throttle signal.
So pretty much when you see this, when it goes to where it's not really, the line's not really overlapping, that's where it hits its peak. The resolution here, it's hard to see, but when we actually did it in the program, you can mouse over it and it shows you the values a little better. But so we measure from where it hits the peak, which is your throttle position. That's when it triggered the GPIO, to where the GPIO triggered, which is basically the flat wall on the graph at the top. So if you look at this one looks like it comes in at about, 34 milliseconds, and it ends at 38 milliseconds, right?
I think we actually measured it from this one here.
So he might have measured it from 32, but actually I would say it's more like 34. So in this case, it might even be even faster for Spektrum.
You can say plus or minus 5 on both of them, too,
yeah,
if you want to. It still shows an average.
Yeah, margin of error. So he said 8. I think it's more like 4. And the reason, well, why do you think that if it's 10 milliseconds apart or 11, whatever you said, how could it possibly get there that quick?
So what's happening is as soon as the radio has the data, it's going to send the data. And Spektrum is pretty fast about it. I've heard from the Spektrum engineer, it's within 1 millisecond that it reads it and sends it out. And the packet width is only like 4 milliseconds long. And actually, Spektrum kind of doubles it up, so you get it twice. But your data is, it could be 4 milliseconds between, or 4 or 5 milliseconds between when the stick is actually read to when the radio gets it. It can be very fast, but it can also vary a bit. It can be upwards of, let's say, if the stick is at full throttle, as soon as the packet is already sending, that means it won't go out to the next packet, which is 11 milliseconds away. So it could vary between basically 4 or 5 to 11 and 12 milliseconds.
So you think in the process of it sending this packet, it's putting this data in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically.
I don't know exactly how Spektrum does it, but it could work that way, absolutely. I don't know, maybe it's a little faster than we think even too, because to be honest, I don't think we've checked the packet. We're basing it on the numbers on how long it takes us to process the packet, yes,
I
exactly.
think. So not necessarily how quick the packets are apart, it's how quick we process them.
Yes.
And we process them faster than any other flight controller software out there. I can guarantee that.
It's done real time. So.
And we'll actually process data, we'll unpack data before the whole packet's even processed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're trying to do this as fast as possible, which is part of our secrets. So yeah, and both packets are treated the same way. They're both done that. We actually don't even pay attention to the CRC on Taranis. I'm not even sure if the CRC is relevant.
It has one problem is that Crossfire seems to treat it a little different, so we have to treat it in a way that works for both.
Yeah, so we don't even wait for the CNC and Taranis. We're going to unpack it as quick as we can. So this is what it came down to. So we measured, using that methodology, and let's just say plus or minus 5 milliseconds. This isn't perfect. This isn't, but the same plus or minus milliseconds on Taranis.
Yes, yes.
So you can see, I mean, basically we had packets that took 8, 9, 17, 15, 18, 9, 15, 15, 9, and 13 on Spektrum. Look at your spreadsheet and you can see that, and we'll show a little screen cap in this video too of this. After those 10 packets, the average was 12.8 milliseconds, which is right along the lines of what we expected. I mean, we expected around 11 milliseconds, what we're always been told. People have done this test we've talked to. It's always been 11 milliseconds, so 12.8 is pretty dead on with what we expected. And with Taranis, we're always told about 20 milliseconds. And you can see the packet average is like 24, 30, 24, 24, 25, 28, 28, 30, 29, 24. What you might be interesting is you notice the deviation is a little bit less with Taranis, so maybe they do a little bit of averaging. It's hard to say. Mm-hmm. We haven't looked at the code yet. We don't know.
I suspect they do.
Yeah, so maybe they're because their potentiometers drift more. They're maybe not as high quality. They do some averaging, and that might be where the latency comes from. We don't know. We haven't looked at the code. You guys, look at the code. You can put in the comments if you know why. But it came down to 26.6 milliseconds average. So this is more than double the average, which is right in line with what we suspected. We've always been telling people 20 milliseconds and 11 milliseconds. 22 and 11, I think, is what we usually say. Mm-hmm. So this is proof. This shows unequivocally that yeah. It shows that one is clearly faster than the other, and one is almost double the speed of the other. Now, you may say that you're not going to notice this, and you might be right. We're not saying you can. We're not saying go out and buy another Spektrum radio. I could care less what you fly. We're going to support them both. We actually recently, Kaylin's been spending the last week making Taranis work like Spektrum for our telemetry and our PID tuning. So we're going to clearly support both. We're trying to make it really easy for us to write code for both at the same time. Our goal with the Lua scripting is to make it in such a way where the same code works on both. So when we have a feature rollout for Spektrum, it's going to roll for Taranis, and I know Futaba's interested in having us help them and get this going in there. And what's the German? Grobner is doing the same thing. I think we're waiting for a radio. Hopefully both of them will send us a radio. I think there's one from Grobner on the way, and we can do some of this cool stuff there. And maybe we can even do tests with them. I mean, the argument's never been, is Grobner faster? We do think Grobner is faster. We do think Futaba is faster. We think, and we even think FlySky is faster.
Grobner is actually the only radio that radio protocol we've put in that has a true CRC. Like Futaba has something very basic, kind of like a CRC. Just you have a front packet you look at and a rear packet you look at. It's about it. Whereas Grobner actually has true CRC, and we know if the data is valid or not. Absolutely sure.
Yeah, so we're not saying there's not better protocols. We actually helped Spektrum write their new protocol. We didn't exactly write, but I personally gave a lot of input and said this is the way we want the telemetry to work. The PID tuning stuff where it sends the data on the screen where we can completely control the screen was because I said this is what we want it to do. Because we want the flight controller to be doing all the logic. It's silly in our opinion to have the radio be anything but a dumb radio. I mean, we have this supercomputer in our quads. It should be doing all the logic it could. We just want the radio to send us all the data and let us do whatever we want with the data. And Spektrum's protocol is kind of more like that. And hopefully other radio manufacturers will kind of follow suit. And I think Taranis is the complete opposite, which is why it frustrates us, because we can make the flight controller really easy to use and set up everything automatically. But the radio is not so easy to do that with. And having to have the scripts on the radio and all that stuff, it's going to make it harder on you as the user to use. So one other thing to bring up before we conclude, you guys look at the data, go ahead and argue with each other. But I think this should be settled once and for all. We got the data out there. Our next video, by the way, is going to be on filter tuning. I know you guys really want that, so that's going to be the next.
The coffee filters?
I'll help you with that later.
Okay.
Yeah. But one other thing to point out, to get these speeds on all throttles, we actually noticed, or actually Kalen actually noticed, that throttle was slower than all the other channels. What happened there?
So I was, it's not something I really noticed FPV, because as a racer you tend to peg the throttle and forget about it, except in some,
Well, not everyone races that way. Not everyone is full throttle the whole course. But
I did notice LOS that throttle felt weird compared to the other 3 axes. You would just move the quad around and throttle felt latent. And I noticed on Taranis, while the other sticks felt latent, it felt the same as throttle. And I couldn't really figure out exactly what was going on until I started to look at black box logging without any smoothing on, any RC smoothing. I noticed, oh wow, throttle is updating at half the rate as the other 3 axes are.
So when we talked about this, I think I actually had the idea. I don't know if it was me or not, but I think it was, to remap that channel. We found out the gear switch was going at the same speed. This makes sense from a helicopter, because in a helicopter you use the gear channel to control the pitch of the blades, right? Collective pitch. And so they want that to be as fast as possible. But it didn't make sense from a multi-rotor standpoint. So we talked to Spektrum, we did some mixing, and we made the gear channel send when the throttle went. And then we remapped it in the original race flight to use the gear channel for throttle, and that sped it up. And since then we talked to Spektrum, and they actually fixed the firmware. So you need to make sure you use, I think it's
Airware, I think they call it.
the latest. Well, yeah, you want to use Airware, which is the latest.
Yeah, that's where the actual fix is in. Yeah.
And you also need to make sure you use the quadcopter model. So if you're not using that, do that. And I think you also need to enable FPV, I think is an option.
Yes.
And make sure you do all that stuff to get the fastest, throttle response or whatever. And we want to say, we support Spektrum, buy Spektrum. They're an American company. They're a good company. They're not cloning. Buy from them. But if you're on a budget, the lemon RXs seem to work okay. Even the orange RXs, I think we're told work okay. I've never tried them.
I use all the Spektrum ones in mine.
Yeah, we both do. Buy the radio at very least. Yeah, the radio is amazing. And you can use Taranis. Most of you might not even notice this. But the top racers, we've always said, we want, especially our sponsored racers, to be as fast as possible. Yeah. So we're going to tell them, hey, use what's the fastest you can, and this is why we've always said Spektrum.
The biggest feeling I'd say that you're going to notice is you feel more connected to the quad. When you want it to do something, it feels like the quad is part of you instead of something you're just controlling. So that's where you really notice it. Okay.
Kalen does request, he hopes you keep putting cactus pictures in his mouth.
Yeah, that's great. Best thing ever.
So I think that concludes today. Tomorrow, or at least sometime soon, the next one's going to be on filtering. I think you guys would have preferred we show you how to use Raceflight, a lot of you guys. But we thought we'd get this over with once and for all. It didn't take us long to do.
How to use Raceflight? You just load defaults and go.
Well, they're confused about filtering.
Load defaults and go.
They think it's like some other flight controllers where you have to bring out your wizard wand.
So real quick peek on the filters is don't try to go the highest you can go or the lowest you can go. Filtering's a magic number. It's specifically set for your quad. So don't feel bad if it's not the number you're looking for. It needs to be what your quad requires.
I think this is spoilers.
It's a spoiler,
guys.
Yes.
But for most people, if you take your quad, you change it to low filtering. Pretty much that's what most people need to do. Yeah. If it flies good at low filtering, it's good. It's over filtered by default. But we'll give you more of that tomorrow.